So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Councillor Gareth Roberts. I am the leader of the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames. We're here this evening to give such updates as we possibly can regarding the continuing delay for the repairs and refurbishment of Hammersmith Bridge. Just to let you know, on the call I have with me several officers who will be offering support and additional information on questions such as if I need assistance. And we have Lucy Thatcher from our planning department, along with Jenny Jackson, also from planning. We have Nick O'Donnell, Assistant Director with responsibility for roads and such like. Paul Chadwick, who is the Director of the Environment Directorate. And we have got Fenner Maynard, and we have got Ellie Firth and Effie Lockram from our Communications Department, who are making everything work. Now, how we're doing this is, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a thing which says Q&A. And what we're going to hope to do is so that if you have questions, pop them in there, just type them out, type the question out if you can. And we will try to either answer them live with you, or we will answer them in writing if it's commonly, frequently asked questions, something like that. But we're going to try and get people to join in. So what we need to do, first and foremost, is run through some housekeeping rules. So the main one is that this is, of course, being filmed, and therefore it will be popping up on the council's YouTube channel. So if you do get called to ask a question, if you wish to, please turn on your camera so that we can, it's always good to have a name to a face. If you don't want to be filmed, if you don't want to feature on the official YouTube channel, then just keep your camera off and we'll just ask you to unmute. You'll unmute, you'll ask the question, and we'll do our best to answer it for you. What we do need to try to make sure is that this is kept civil. I appreciate that tempers are running high, and we will try to ensure that everybody can get heard, but we do need to make sure that it's done in a respectful atmosphere. We have got our online bouncers, should the needs come up, for them to take people who are causing issues into a side room, ask if there's anything that we can do to help, and then take it forward from there. But I don't expect it to happen. We've been doing these sorts of meetings for the last year, and we've never had the opportunity to use that function yet. I don't think we're going to be doing it tonight. To kick things off, first, when we had this last one, when it was a task force, I apologise because it's taken far too long, and I'll issue that same apology again. It is still taking far too long. I appreciate and understand the very real frustration, hurt, upset, and indeed anger that Barnes and people from surrounding areas are feeling about the way that this issue has been allowed to drag on. Believe me, I would much rather that this bridge was open to people, that it was up and running, and that the ferry was going, and all of those things, because I can see that it is causing huge disruption to local residents, and we want to make sted that we get this sorted as soon as we possibly can. In terms of the questions, I can't guarantee that I'll have an answer for every question tonight, simply because, as you know, the bridge is not in the ownership of the council, and we do not have a responsibility for its maintenance and repair. This is an asset which is owned by Hammersmith, and it is their legal responsibility to keep it maintained and to repair it. However, there are wider questions, as you know, about who should foot the bill for those repairs. If you don't know, the asset was transferred to Hammersmith Council when the old GLC was abolished, and the bridges were just sort of sliced up and divided out without any real thought given as to how they would be maintained and kept in the future. Certainly no money was allocated to that position. In terms of the answers which I do have for you, you might not like the answers which I give you, but what I will do this evening is try to be as honest with you as I possibly can, because that is the one thing which I can do, is to be honest. You may wish to ask questions about the task force, and that is entirely correct. You can do that. I may not be able to go into full detail about what is said in the task force, because I do think there needs to be a degree of confidentiality regarding these meetings. However, I will do my best to let you know what is said, but it's sort of a Chatham House rule, it was discussed, this issue. This was the outcome of that issue, rather than Mr. Hargreaves or Mrs. Jones said this, or that sort of thing. So that's the background. That's the scenario. What we're going to do is go straight through into questions, and we have the first one, which I see here, is from TSA, and it's regarding when will the ferry be up and running? Is TSA there?
Hi there. Yes, it's Catherine.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Catherine Riggs. Yes, I'm keen to know when the ferry will be up and running, please.
Well, the answer to that one is, we go straight in with the QI specialist. We just don't know at the moment because the tender process has just been finalised with TfL, who are running that process, and they will be making an announcement in the next few days. The licence, once it's been awarded, then has to go through a statutory hiatus. I think it's about 10 days, so that those bidders who were not successful get the opportunity to lodge complaints, challenges, etc. And then it goes down to the necessary permissions and what have you from various authorities, such as the Port of London Authority, and the one which is the real piece of work is the MMO, the Marine Management Organisation, and they will take, well, they say it's going to take 13 weeks until they can process the application fully. Now, we hope that they're going to be able to move far quicker than that. And we will be making that case when we meet again in the task force, which is next Thursday. Because what we want to be able to make sure is that the ferry can be up and running as quickly as possible, but we do need to make sure that the proper permissions are in place. So at the moment, we were hoping, well, I say at the moment, we were hoping to have this thing up and running by spring, but it could be mid-summer by the time it's going. If you do the maths, 13 weeks and 10 days is what we should be looking for. But everybody wants to get the ferry going as quickly as we possibly can, and we can only apologise that there have been so many delays. Next one is Julian Thomas.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you.
Very nice.
So you have a question about cycling and walking?
Well, yes, I think at the moment, my last job was working in Shepherd's Bush. I live in Barnes near the Red Lion. Now, currently, if I take public transport, it takes over an hour to get from my house to Shepherd's Bush. I used to walk that in 40 minutes. And I used to walk that every day. I can cycle it in 15 minutes. Now, with the bridge closed, there are only two options that are open to me. One is going over Putney Bridge. The other is going over Barnes Bridge and then through the back ways past Chiswick House, which also includes the big main roads around the A4. So I don't think I'm the only person here who's listening to you tonight that is thinking, why aren't we getting more chances for people who commute across that bridge? It's a big thoroughfare. There's a lot of traffic that's going through Barnes now that we would never have before. There's a lot of traffic going through Putney, I'm sure, that we would never have before. From a very personal point of view, if I want to take public transport from here to Shepherd's Bush, where I used to work, it would take me an hour and 15 minutes according to public transport, TfL. Now, I cycle most of the time. Sorry to interrupt you. No,
it's all right. I'm just conscious that we have lots of questions building up, so okay. I don't want to rush you, but
well, I'm happy to rant on, but I'm going to let you go in. No, please give me an answer to a couple of these, because the biggest problem is we can't walk across, we can't cycle across, we can't get a bus across. Cars aside, there is a massive issue here, and that to me that's the biggest issue with going across Hammersmith Bridge. And from a personal point of view, I would be happy for Hammersmith Bridge to be opened as a pedestrian and cyclist only route and find another route for cars. but I'm sure there's other issues going on. Anyway,
there are. In terms of the opening to cycling and pedestrians, this will be given the priority under any scheme that happens. So you may have been part of the task force meeting about October, I think it was, last year, where the point was made that if they could have got on with the first stage stabilization works and the second stage stabilization works, we would have been looking at getting access for both cycling and walking guaranteed on this bridge sometime I think probably around July, to be honest, if memory serves. That's about the right time frame. But the money wasn't forthcoming, so we are still waiting slightly. However, whichever scheme comes through for getting the bridge reopened is going to be the pedestrians and cyclists which are going to be over there first. Motor vehicles, buses, blue light responders, that will come second. So they're going to be first. I mean, really, if you were to be asking me to stick a finger in the air, I would be, depending actually what the MOT report, you may have heard about this, because they're looking through all the engineering, that's going to be reporting soon. And it may be that they are now satisfied that the bridge is stable to get people over. But it could be about a year, if not, to be perfectly honest with you. Of course, the ferry is going to be able to get people over there by pedestrian, so that's going to cut your journey down in an enormous amount of time. And I understand that there may be some provision on there for bicycles, but we need to wait until we get the final update from the ferry providers about precisely what they're going to be getting. So your journey will be shorter. If you've got the Brompton, great, because you can just carry that on. But if not, then we have to look at what's going on with the ferry about the cycling provision. Certainly, pedestrian walk-on is what's going to be going on there.
Oh, Johnny, I really appreciate your honesty.
Not at all.
And but I really do worry about the speed at which this is happening.
Oh crikey, so do I. I mean, I know it sounds really odd having the leader of the council that we should be coming along and saying yes, yes, yes. But to a certain extent, this council's hands are very much tied, and I would say that to a certain extent, Hammersmith's hands are tied because they don't have access to the ready cash. The people who got access to the ready cash that could have got this ball rolling months ago is government. And if they could just, if they had front loaded, we sent a letter to Baroness Sarah Olney, your MP, and I sent the letter in October 2020 saying, look, can you front load the requirement? It's about £50 million. Can you front load that money at least so that the first and second stage stabilisation works could get underway and give people certainty about a date when the bridge could reopen to pedestrians and cyclists? And that request was refused.
So, Gareth, a little question. I mean,
yes, of course.
Obviously, you're not living in Barnes, and I am, and obviously, it affects me a lot more. I deliberately trade a lot with the people on either side of Hammersmith Bridge, and they are suffering. They are suffering not just because of lack of trade, obviously, because there's not that many people coming through, but also because of mainly because of lack of trade, to be honest. And what can you do? What are you? Because that is on the Barnes side of things. I understand that the bridge is not part of your. To be honest, it's as far as I understand it, it's part of Fulham's council. Fulham.
Hammersmith, yes.
Yes. So, but it's obviously affecting you, and this is what's affecting you. The people on this side, the south side, I have to say, because nobody knows where I am. But what can we do to help those traders? Because they're not getting the footfall that they used to get. They're not getting the buses stopping outside their shops. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, very respectable people who actually travel, they commute to work to those shops over an hour and a half in order to get to those shops, in order to work there. They're not necessarily people who work in Barnes. So, it's a bigger problem than just a commuting system?
No. I get that, and I take your point. I'm going to have to move on after this question, so please forgive me if I do move on. Yes, we will be looking at what support that we can offer through our economic development team to these particular parades of shops. Indeed, all over the borough is struggling. Let's not deny that because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's hitting businesses hard all over. Particularly hard in Barnes, of course, because, as you quite rightly say, there is not the footfall of what one would expect from the people who used to get off the bus. Don't forget, before the bridge was closed to motor vehicles, people didn't get off the bus; they would just sail straight through. But yeah, we do need to look at that, and we've got good working relationships with the VCA, the Barnes Central Association, to make sure that we can get as much targeted support as we possibly can. The thing is, the council doesn't have infinite resources. I mean, the one thing which we can all do every day of our lives is that rather than go and buy something from the the big boys, the Tesco, the supermarket, the Sainsbury's, the Waitrose, is to go and use your local shops. Even if it's down to the position that when you go to Waitrose and spend 20 quid and you get a free newspaper. Don't take the free newspaper if you want a newspaper. Go and buy one from the local newsagent. It's those small things that we can all do to make a difference. But yes, we will be dealing with our economic development team to see what additional assistance can be given to traders, particularly hard to hit in the Barnes area. Okay, we're going to move on to a question which David Akix. This may be something I bring Nick O'Donnell in to help with it.
Hi, Councillor. Do you want to just run through the question? I'm sorry, there's so many on there. I'm trying to make sure I pick them up.
The question, Nick, is which body has primary responsibility for maintaining A roads?
Okey-doke. So the A roads in the borough are divided between ourselves and Transport for London. There is a list of those roads on the TfL website and also on the borough website. But in simple terms, you take example, the A306, for example, is a borough road, and that's obviously the key one in linking up here. But a road like the A205 falls under TfL. So basically, the short answer is divided between the two.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to move to Keon Dajasar.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is that Keon?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, as sort of the 6th richest country in the world, how come our government isn't willing to provide a new bridge that's desperately needed in the country's capital city? I understand that it's not their legal responsibility, but why has not enough been done by the government to get this sorted out?
Well, quite. I mean, it's a good question, and it's one which I wish I had the answer to. I mean, there are various suggestions. I mean, one of them, to be frank, is that this is being, the bridge is being used as a political football. The other is that, owing to COVID-19, there are so many more demands on the public purse than there were previously, and therefore they have to, cut their cloth according to their pocket. However, when you see news stories such as the Prime Minister is considering building a new bridge between Scotland and Northern Ireland, you think that perhaps the focus really should be on maintaining the existing infrastructure rather than going, chasing after rainbow projects somewhere in the future. I mean, the government, there will always have to be a discussion at some point about where the money will come from to pay for this bridge. And it could well be that there's going to be a sizable requirement from Hammersmith and Fulham. It could well be that there may be some form of private finance initiative which could be pursued in order to recoup the money. But the big, glaringly obvious fact, as far as I'm concerned, is that the government has the cash. Even though they're a bit, they're spending it like Billy-O everywhere, the government's got the resources to be able to sink this money in now. And that's when the money is needed. So what should be happening, in my view, is that the government comes along, guarantees the money needed to repair the bridge, and then gets into the legal wranglings with Hammersmith and Fulham afterwards, because those conversations will be had. But at the moment, what's happening is that people's lives are being absolutely trashed whilst those conversations are being had. What needs to happen, come in, pay for the bridge repairs, and then start having the arguments about it later, because that just seems to be the most logical, reasonable thing to do. Why the government doesn't want to do it, I honestly couldn't say. You may remember that they were very keen just before, I think it was November and December 2019, you could barely move in Hammersmith and Barnes. The government ministers saying that they had got the cash to sort out a temporary road bridge between the two, and then that was knocked on the head. So really, I think what needs to happen is the government pays and then discussions about it later, because at the moment, people are just watching by as, kids are having difficulty getting to school, people can't get to hospital, people are dying as a result of not being able to get across the bridge because they can't reach urgent medical care. So the government needs to step in and then have discussions about how it gets repaid later. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Gareth, can I just add So I think the question also included the term new bridge. I think I just need to make the point, and possibly with the support of a colleague or two, that it is a grade 2-star listed bridge, one of the highest ratings in terms of heritage value bridges in the country. So that is another added complication. It ain't easy to just build a new bridge. We have to respect the heritage value of the current bridge designed by Sir Joseph Basil, I would get his name wrong, Bazalgette. I probably said it wrong. And that means also respect not just the bridge in terms of the bridge itself, but the views and aspects of the bridge. So it's even difficult to, in planning terms and heritage terms, to build a brand new bridge alongside it. So it's an added complication, I'll just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Robler, you're next.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Yeah, my question was because I had, from a good source, heard that the tenderers for the temporary ferry crossing had been told that the TfL people were unable to make an award because they didn't like the commercial and risk profile that the tenderers had given. Have you more information than me, sir?
I'm not so sure about that. In terms of the government has. I was giving the government a hard time a moment ago, and I will stop giving the government a hard time on this one. They have, as part of the TfL funding deal, dished out, I think, about £4 million to say, look, TfL, get the ferry up and running. So I don't think, to be honest, that it is too much of a cold feet collybobbles on the part of TfL. What could be driving it is the ongoing funding for TfL going forward, because of course they're about to come up. They've had the emergency funding package guaranteed, and I think that technically that's about to run out. In the next few weeks, to be honest. So that might be the thing which is giving TfL slight collywobbles, but I do not think, and I think, you will be able to hear the screams in Orkney if this happens, that if the ferry was suddenly pulled at the last minute simply because of a funding wrangle between TfL and central government. So I think we can be as assured as we possibly can be, bearing in mind this is Hammersmith Bridge and we've had the rugs pulled out from us before, is that the ferry will be up and running and that TfL won't back out because they've got concerns such as the ones which you raised.
Yeah, I think couple of things that I know. Obviously, the cost of the ferry service will depend on the duration, and there were parameters in the tender inquiry that made the bids around about 4 to 5 million. So what it may be, and we probably seem to be about on the same level of knowledge on this one, is that they have not quite enough money for what they asked for, so that the service will be reduced from what was asked for. So I suppose I should add in the question, if I may, to you.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. were yourselves at Richmond and Hammersmith and Fulham involved in setting the level of service that you would like to have?
No, this has been a TfL decision, and it's an operational decision for TfL. We have, of course, given our views as part of the task force, but we weren't involved in the in drawing up the tender, for want of a better term. What I do know is that that there's a minimum contract of a year for the ferry, and then it will be reviewed going forward after that. So we'll be messing about in boats for at least a year, and then they will review based on the funding allocations which they've been given. But it could well be that it extends beyond that 12 months. Okay, well, thanks very much, and thank you for answering my question. Thank you. Duty Price, we're coming to a question from Duty Price next. Just in case, the reason why I'm asking people to give their question when they come on, of course, is you can't see. I can see the questions as they're here, but you can't see what they are. So otherwise, you're sort of rather in the dark. So Duty Price, are you there?
Hi, Councillor Roberts. Julie's using an older version of the Zoom, so I'm having trouble unmuting her. So
Okay, then we go to Mr. Sebastian Erskine next, please.
Hi, Gareth. Just a very quick question. So obviously, you know that the Department for Transport commissioned a report back last year by ACOM, and that report basically indicated that there was a chance that the bridge could be reopened to pedestrians, a controlled reopening. And obviously, we know that Hammersmith Fulham Council have not, despite requests by both Greg Hand's MP and also several Conservative elite councillors on Hammersmith Fulham Council side, to release the report and release their engineering reports that continue to suggest they cannot under any circumstances. So you talk the game about, you've got a good relationship with Hammersmith Fulham Council. What pressure is Richmond Council putting on their Labour colleagues in Hammersmith Fulham Council to actually step up instead of cozying up and playing these games? Because residents are suffering. Okay, well, first I would defend the idea of cozying up and playing games and what have you, because it's simply not the case. I feel that it is a better opportunity, for residents to be on good terms with our neighbours, particularly when we've got a bridge that we need to get opened and fixed. So, and we tried before 2018 to do the hard man routine of insisting this and finger wagging that, and it really didn't work. So, if we found that didn't work, then I don't really see the point of trying exactly the same tactic again, only for it to fail a second time. The ACOM report that you refer to, yes, that's an interesting one. And of course, we've also got the Fleck report as well, the Professor Fleck, who's some professor of bridge engineering or something or other from Cambridge. So they did their reports, which were desktop reports based on the Mott MacDonald reports from Hammersmith. And so they didn't go on site. They didn't go have the deep dive, which was done by the previous engineer's report. So theirs was a very much a computer modeled desktop exercise based on available evidence. And they thought that there was it was conservative with the small c. Conservative with the small c approach taken by Hammersmith and Fulham to get the bridge to close it so preemptively as they did. There is a further report coming forward, which if it shows that the bridge can be reopened, I have no doubt that Hammersmith will be delighted to get the bridge reopened as well, because it will stop them getting hard time as well. So I don't think, to go back to the question, so what pressure are we putting on colleagues? We're not putting pressure on, we're having regular constructive dialogue with them in the best interest of our residents. But they haven't released it, Gareth. I mean, that's the problem.
No, they aren't releasing the report simply because, whether you like, as a going right back to the very beginning, I'm going to have some answers that people don't like. The reason why Hammersmith and Fulham Council are not releasing the report is that they have got security concerns because it's a very detailed, effectively a blueprint of the bridge. And they have got security concerns, given that until very, very recently, they had people trying to blow the thing up. Now, I know that there are people in the audience who would be thrilled at the idea of the bridge being blown up, because it means that we'll get on with building a new one. But they've got very serious concerns from a security angle. And I know that Greg Hands and various Conservative councillors on the Hammersmith side have called for the release of that report. The one thing which I would say hasn't happened is that the Department of Transport, Grant Shapps and Baroness Veer have not called for that report to be published. So one assumes that they are getting some fairly decent intelligence from MI5 and all the things, so that they know precisely what they're talking about. Yes, Greg Hands, as one of the Conservative MPs within Hammersmith and Fulham, may wish to make political points to try to get the bridge reopened, but he's doing that in a personal capacity, well, not personal capacity, he's doing that in his capacity as a constituency MP, rather than the member of the government. The question I would ask anybody that says, is pressure being put on Hammersmith and Fulham is, have you heard the government publicly calling for the release of that report? And no, they haven't.
But he is the government. He's a Minister of State. And the problem
he's a Minister of State, but he's not calling on behalf of the government. I mean, I've sat in the task force meetings, and there has never once been a call from anybody associated with the Department of Transport to say, release the report. Never. Okay, we'll move on to Redgon.
Hi, I was asking about the Foster-Riblatt proposal, which is going to be presented to Hammersmith Council. And does that have legs? Does that have any prospect of progressing? And if there are issues with it, would that have not made more sense simply as a pedestrian cycling crossing? I would not need to be a double-decker, would not need to be structurally so obtuse given the less weight, etc., and could be a closed box with better access for pedestrians and much more feasible.
The Foster-Riblatt Cowie scheme that you mentioned has been presented to the task force, and a feasibility study is currently being done on that. And we hope to get a further report on this particular rather innovative design coming forward at the next task force meeting. There will be, I mean, let's not make any bones about it. This, as Paul's already mentioned, this is a listed structure, so we need to make sure that Historic England are on board with this, and of course the Victorian Society. But at the moment, from the limited amount of information that we've had shared with us and the amount that we can put into the public domain, of course, it does look as though it is a potential goer. It certainly seems to be far more of a reasonable proposition than other temporary structures that we have had suggested from other agencies and other practices. So yeah, if I was a betting man, I would put this one as being slightly better than even, as getting off the ground at the moment. But as soon as we get the feasibility report presented to us with the task force, then we'll be able to give far greater clarity. And as I say, I would be delighted to get this one off the ground, because it seems to be a very reasonable proposition, insofar as what it suggests it can do is deliver it more, both vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists across the bridge more quickly and more cheaply, because what the idea is that parts of the bridge would be taken away and sandblasted or buffed and polished and then brought back, so that there isn't the safety implications of doing all this work on site. So they just effectively take these huge pieces of cast iron away, do all the work that's needed, and then come back and replace them in situ. So this apparently makes it cheaper and it makes it quicker. So I think that I hope it's going to happen, to be honest, but I've probably gone slightly further than I'm allowed to say, because I'll get people shouting at me about procurement issues any minute now. But I very much hope that we'll be able to deliver a crossing along those lines soon.
And if it were to proceed, what would the time frame of that Foster's Riblatt?
That's tricky. I see my colleague Paul Chadwick sort of leaning in. I'm not sure whether he was doing that for just to adjust his set or. No, he's not. He's throwing his hands up in the air, ladies and gentlemen. I can't give you that information. What we can do, though, is we've got your email address, and we will endeavour to get you a response along those lines as soon as possible. And if we're doing a frequently asked questions, which we certainly do on.
No, I can't hear anything.
Can you hear anything?
I'm going to go out and come in again. Sorry, everybody.
This is live television, folks. This is what happens. So what we'll do, I'm going to take Bill Christie's question, and then we'll get Paul to come in and give us the response on the timelines, if that's all right. So, Bill Christie.
Bill is no longer on the call.
Okay, we'll endeavour to get him an email response to his question. Yoki Chunk. This is an interesting one. It's not one I've had raised before, so I hope Yoki's there.
Yoki also isn't on the call, sorry.
Oh, well, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to tell you what the question is, because it's a good one. It's not something which has been raised. Is it possible to engage some Barnes residents representative into the task force for the bridge, so that the close monitoring and pressure from the residents can highlight to the task force? Probably not, is the short answer. Simply owing to the fact that there's already so many people on it as to make it look like a touring production of The Sound of Music. But there are so many voices which are being heard. And to be honest, if we start involving somebody from Barnes, then really we should be thinking about having somebody from Hammersmith as a minimum. And then do we start looking towards East Sheen? Do we start looking towards Fulham? Do we start looking towards Mortlake? And very soon, because there are so many competing voices and all, everybody should have an equal weighting. So that's why you have me there. And anybody who wants to get in touch with me, and this has happened in the past, anybody who wants to get in touch with me and get me to ask a question on their behalf, as long as it's reasonable, by the way, as long as they want to get me to ask a question on their behalf, this has happened with the BCA, then I'm more than happy to get those questions put directly to the task force. What I would suggest is probably the best mechanism is to, if you've got questions, because you've got a pressure group which exists, which is the Hammersmith Bridge SOS group. And we found that they have been very constructive in their approach with Richmond Council. So if you funnel the questions through them, they will do a spot of triaging probably. And then, as they know that they've done it before, they've asked me to raise individual questions, and I can get them sent off to TfL or to the Baroness or to who else is on there, Hammersmith, and try to get answers back for you. So no direct representation of residents, however, you've got me there doing that. Judith Allen has got a question, which is, when will the bridge be fixed and what is the process and timeline? I think that we've been through that to a certain extent. So Judith, what I'm going to do is bring you in. Oh, she's just disappeared. Is Judith, are you still there?
Hi.
Hi, Judith.
Hi.
So
I really haven't followed it that much, so it'd be quite handy to know just what the timelines are in this, because it seems to be quite a muddle.
Oh, it's quite, I would say, an extreme, to be honest. I mean, and I don't mean that in a flippant way at all. It is very muddled at the moment. What I can say is that the bridge fixing process will start as soon as the funding agreement has been finalised. And when will the funding agreement finalised? I honestly don't know. It's currently the course of comment and argument between the two main authorities. So I can't give you guaranteed timelines. I would be incredibly surprised if work of some description hasn't started by the end of the summer. I mean, there's already some work going on, of course, but substantial works, I would imagine, should be started by the end of the summer or autumn at the very least. But we've been here for such a long time. We've put up dates in the past, and those dates have gone and passed, and then we looked at them and thought, oh, I thought that was supposed to have started by now. I mean, the ferry was supposed to have started at the beginning of spring, was when the ferry was supposed to be started. So I don't want to give categoric dates because I don't want to let people down on those dates. So whilst I appreciate it is difficult and frustrating, we just have to wait and see at the moment. But hopefully sooner rather than later. And as I said to one of the earlier questioners, the pedestrian and cycling route will be the one which is opened far quicker than anything to do with vehicles. I see we have Paul Chadwick back with us, who I'm trying to remember what the question you were supposed to be answering was, Paul. No, I don't know what's happening with Paul's broadband, but I blame the council. So we're going to be, a question from Anna Robertson now, which is about the ferry.
Yes, I'm lucky enough to have a 60 plus Oyster card, but my daughter works in Hammersmith and quite often has to travel across London for work. So she would have to pay the ferries and the buses and the tubes. So is this ferry going to be free because it's free to walk across the bridge? Or will it be tied into the Oyster card system and then be capped within your day of travel?
Yes, the ferry is not going to be free, but it will be tagged in with the Oyster card system. It will be free if your daughter sort of leaps on a bus the minute that she gets off the ferry, because you know, the hopper scheme that it doesn't matter how many interchanges you make within an hour. If they're all within an hour of each other, it's still the same £1.50 price. So it's the same cost as a bus ticket. It will be free to people with the over 60s Freedom Pass and Oyster card, and what have you. And of course, it's also going to be free for the under 18s travel card. So all of the concessions which you would normally expect and the rules regarding those concessions on a bus are exactly the same for the ferry. And it will be linked in with the Oyster card. So it's going to be tap in, tap out technology. And that should, I hope, answer the question for you. Okay, Andrew Curry has a question regarding the long-term future of the ferry.
Hi, yeah, thanks for all the information so far, very helpful. Just for context, I'm the captain of a local rowing club, and obviously the provision of a ferry, when combined with the closure of the bridge and the PLA's safety laws, is potentially fatal to our operation. So I have three sort of main questions here. Firstly, is this ferry permanent, regardless of the status of the bridge? Secondly, will river traffic be combined with pedestrians and cyclists in the sort of priority scheme? And thirdly, how have we let this issue become more complicated than resulting in maximum pressure on trying to get this bridge fixed?
Yeah, I mean, the ferry is not going to be permanent. It is on a fixed contract, as outlined earlier. So at the moment, the fixed contract is a year, but can be extended if the need arises. And it will be a case of if the need arises. At the moment, I'm sure you'll agree that something needs to be done to enable people to get across the river. And I mean, we've had all sorts of suggestions. One person even suggested a zip wire in order to get people across, which I'm not quite sure was the way forward, but it showed imagination. But the ferry is the only way, and we need to get people over. But the idea of having a ferry and a fully operational walking and cycling bridge as a bare minimum just doesn't make any sense to me. And of course, we want to make sure that, you know, this emergency measure which has been put in is going to have as small an impact on other, I'm going to be pompous now, riparian usage as we possibly can. So we don't want to get people, you know, the regular river users, we don't want to get their backs up with this ferry. So the sooner it can be retired, the better, as far as I think everybody is concerned.
So just to confirm, there's an understanding here that the solution that satisfies the maximum number of people is the fixing of this bridge?
I think so. I'm trying to work out, I was just trying to work out whether there was a catch in that question, and I couldn't find one. So the solution which satisfies the most number of people is the fixing of the bridge. Yes.
Thank you.
Not at all. Is that the answer you were hoping for?
It'll do for now until the bridge is fixed.
Excellent. Thank you. Stephen Howie has a question about zonage.
Hi, Gareth. Thank you for taking my question.
Not stop.
I, like some others, will be returning to in the office in the next month or so. And living in North Barnes, I'd usually do so via Hammersmith, via the tube into central London. I'm aware that my new commute will be longer down via Barnes railway station and also more expensive, especially if I opt to get the bus down to the train station and then head into central London from there. Is there any chance, any possibility we could ask TfL if Barnes railway station could be moved to zone 2/3 rather than zone 3? Because that would reduce the costs ever so slightly, but over the course of a year or years, it would make quite a difference, I think.
Sure. I mean, the easy answer is yes, we can ask. and the tougher question is going to be whether they'll say yes. But we are more than happy to enter into those discussions on behalf of our residents with TfL. To give them well, I'll give you the answer that which they almost certainly will give you, is that their revenue has been depleted so horrifically over the last 12 months that they would not be able to do it from it. It would be financially impossible for them. However, we need to explore that on your behalf. And tell you what, Stephen, if you want to drop me an email, you can find my details, councillor.groberts@richmond.gov.uk, and give me a prompt, and I'll dash that email off to Heidi Alexander in the morning if you just give me a nudge on it.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Not at all. Margie D from London. Margie D, London. Here we go. Sorry.
Margie isn't on the call.
Okay, we'll endeavour to get an email response to Margie as well. Andrew Mullock.
Andrew isn't on the call.
Okay. Sorry if you are on these calls and you've gone into a different waiting room or something. I do apologise. Again, we will try, and we've got 103 open questions waiting to get through. I'm happy to go through as long as we can this evening. But obviously there will have to be a time when I let the officers go and get their tea. But those people who don't get their questions asked, we will try to give you an email answer if we can. So Mike Miller.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Right. So is it possible to keep the facade of the bridge, as I assume that's what's listed, and build a new bridge within the facade?
No, that's a good question. I think it's not just the facade of the bridge. I think it's the entirety of the thing. It will become, to a certain extent, a bit like Cromwell's sword, Trigger's broom, the bits that keep getting replaced. And at what point does Hammersmith Bridge cease to be Hammersmith Bridge because so much of it has been replaced? But Paul Chadwick will be able to assist here.
Yeah, sorry about earlier. I don't know why I disappeared, but it's probably a very tricky question. I didn't want to answer, but there you go. No, it is the whole of the bridge. I'm sure my colleague Lucy Thatcher, one of our most senior planning officers, can help me on this, but it's the whole of the bridge. Pretty confident of that. It's the engineering is a part of this listing. The very engineering that's letting us down now is a part of the heritage. So, Lucy, do you want to add more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a Grade 2 star listed building, and it was designated in response to its architectural quality from its form, colour and heraldry. It's also because it's one of the most distinctive bridges, and it replaced one of the first suspension bridges in the world, and the foundations remain on site. Also because of its technological special interest, and it's linked with the Victorian engineer. So it's the whole structure, and that's the reasonings why it was listed.
Yes, but it's no longer fit for purpose.
But it's still a Grade 2 star listed building, and our national policy makes it perfectly clear in that their loss of such should be wholly exceptional and refused unless it's absolutely demonstrated necessary and substantial public benefits outweigh the loss, and there is no evidence to suspect it is absolutely necessary, given that everyone on this call and working with colleagues are committed through the investigatory works and committed to the repair and strengthening of the bridge.
But if it's in essence, a museum piece, which we all want to look at and look at our heritage, does that not mean that there's justification for a bridge that's actually useful to be near it in some way?
Yes, I mean, I'll take this bit because it's it's probably a more political question rather than the planning question. That part of it is that if you wanted to replace, if you wanted to knock the bridge down and stick it off Lake Havasu is where London Bridge ended up at. If you wanted to pop it into a museum, if there was a museum big enough, then you would have to go through so many hurdles, so many consultations, so many public inquiries. The Secretary of State, the MHCLG, what is that? Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government would have to give his say. there would be a thunderous uproar from English Heritage, or Heritage England, whatever they're calling themselves these days. And of course, the Victorian Society would see, flying pickets launched by Griff Rhys-Jones to come and just, give everybody a hard time. It would, by the time you've got through all of that, it would have been quicker to repair and refurbish the existing structure than to knock it down, remove it, and build something new, because you would be mired in legal challenge for the best part of a decade at a minimum.
Yeah.
Thanks for the answer.
Not at all. Judy Price wishes to know about the ferry again. So, Judy.
Unfortunately, Judy's Zoom is the old version.
Oh, okay. Well, Judy's question, I'll address it because I think a lot of people on the call might want to know. It's where is the ferry running to and from? I know the Harrods Wharf is an option. What are the other options on the south side, and what are the options for the north side? Okay, so in terms of where it's running to and from, this is one of those we just don't know, and it will be decided in due course, largely informed, I understand, by the ferry operator. And we are currently looking at various options. So on the north side, the Hammersmith side, there is the potential for Queen Caroline Street. There's a landing point close to there. And there is also Fulham Reach. And they are, both of them, possible, and both of them are not without their individual complications. In terms of the south side, there is the towpath relatively adjacent to Hammersmith Bridge itself. On the Barn side, this is Hammersmith Bridge towpath, and of course Fulham Harrods Wharf is the other one there. So at the moment, we just don't know which of the landing points there will be, and we wait with as much interest as you all do to find out precisely where this ferry is going to be running to and from. I mean, the most sensible, no, actually, I'm not going to go into the most sensible, because I find myself straying possibly into planning issues, and Lucy will be down on me like a ton of bricks, and we can't have that. So we're going to, there's a question which I really don't understand from Howard Potter, but I'm going to hope Nick O'Donnell does. So Howard, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
we can.
I'm speaking from the long-term resident of Sheen and Mortlake, and the traffic in that area has grown significantly, even accepting the vagaries of the lockdown. But it's just that the peak is extending, and what is normally an off-peak period is now filling. And as we come out of lockdown, it's going to become horrendous. There are so many uncertainties here, and that's been evidenced in the submissions made to the GLA about a big development like the Stag Brewery. So there's a lot of uncertainties in terms of what will come and when and if. The impact of the bridge and whatever its traffic function ultimately is quite serious. And so what we've seen is inadequate data. We know that TfL have been playing with traffic signal timings, and we know that there's a lot of uncertainty here, particularly in regard to major developments that are about to happen or seek to be happening through the planning process. So that's why there's concern. And so we feel that there should be a strategic analysis, a proper strategic analysis to understand what is really going on in the area.
Nick, are you able to help with this? It's all about traffic flow. I mean, this is your specialist subject.
Certainly, Councillor. I'll start the answer off and see if Lucy might want to chip in as well. But the long and short of the questions, and thank you for putting them forward, are that yes, TfL have made multiple tweaks and changes to signal timings in the area. They're under regular review. We do press them regularly for looking at, they are, sorry, for the absolute clarity, they're in charge of all the traffic signals in London. So they deal with all the timings. We make regular requests to them. They have site engineers out there doing reviews. Unfortunately, it's not a magic wand in terms of the ability to make changes that suddenly free up lots of traffic space. In most cases, the signals are optimized and working as best as they can. I think what really hasn't helped since the bridge has been shut, and forgive me for saying the obvious, is just the huge amount of change and flux and uncertainty around lockdowns and tiers and all the other changes that are happening out there, as you rightly say, Mr. Potter, in relation to kind of life that's moved on since. So they're heavily affecting the different types of flows in the area, changes in movements and patterns of behaviour. There aren't 24-hour traffic flows that are being counted, but there are regular screen lines of traffic data being recorded. And on your last point, I've made very recently to TfL the point that we do need a wider strategic study looking at rebaselining a lot of the information, because a lot of the data will have changed. And B, we're very keen to take a more holistic view of kind of what needs to be done within the area, rather than focusing in very niche view that TfL have taken forward. So would agree with you that there is a need for a wider study, and we are pressing for that. I don't know if Jenny or Lucy want to come in further.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, because I know that we, like you, were concerned over the lack of consideration given to the closure of the bridge in the latest submission to the GLA on the Stag site. And we welcomed the additional technical documents that have just finished the consultation with us and the public. We have, however, outlined concerns on those still, and particularly around the closure of the bridge and the lack of detail given to the impact on the closure on travel routes, trip distribution, and how the scheme can meet the travel plan aspirations. So we've submitted our response, and that's available to view on our website as well for you all. And we are welcoming a further engagement with the TfL and GLA colleagues to ensure that the closure is fully considered in the Stag Brewery. It would be unreasonable for us to insist that no development shall take place until the bridge is opened. We're just asking them to consider the impacts of the closure on construction and operational traffic, and that hybrid stage between the construction, which is a 7-year process. And as Nick says, one of their mitigation schemes was option 1, which we're asking for a much more holistic view and further surveys to be undertaken in the wider area to really understand the traffic issues on the network at the moment.
Okay, thank you both. And we'll move to Robert Murray.
So I just needed to unmute.
Yes, of course. Hello.
Okay. Now, I mean, my question is on the issue of, I suppose, the politics of what's going on. And you earlier mentioned that really the government could, if it wished to, cough up. I mean, clearly, if every major local authority problem, as simple as that, I just don't think it's realistic. I mean, if the government were to cough up for Hammersmith Bridge, I don't see why other local authorities with major spending problems or deficits couldn't ask for that to be done as well. So I just wanted to say that in response to what you said earlier.
Yeah, of course.
I do think that more could be done by Richmond Council to hold Hammersmith and Fulham to account, at least for the pedestrian access. I mean, arguably, more could have been done before it was actually closed to pedestrian access, and more could be done now to get it open quickly. I mean, I just fail to see why. And I think you mentioned it could be the tail end of the year before we even I just can't see why that should be the case. And as long as you, as it were, is taking the side of Hammersmith and Fulham and trying to make it a central government issue, then you're also letting them off the hook.
No, it's a fair point, and it's one of the reasons why I could have quite easily have ducked to that question. I want to address it head on. I mean, as I mentioned before, we had a relationship with Hammersmith and Fulham which was based on confrontation, which was based on this, why aren't you doing more style, finger wagging across the river, and it got us absolutely nowhere at all, to the point where communications had stopped because there was just no point. Richmond had their view, Hammersmith had theirs, and never the twain shall meet. What we've tried to do, as much as we possibly can, is to approach this as, this is both of our problems. And how I approach it, and I appreciate that there are frustrations within the Barnes and wider community because people think that, I'm not doing enough, punching on their behalf. But my question is always, you wait until that's really going to get you results. Get angry when you can get results from getting angry. But I look at it very much from the position as the leader of a local authority. If somebody had come to me, because this could be our problem, let's not forget, because as I say, when the GLC divided up the bridges between the local authorities, they could quite as easily have given this Hammersmith Bridge to Richmond, and we would have a bill for £150 million on our plate at this moment. In fact, we could if I understand there was a suggestion that we should have taken over management of the bridge at one point, but no. I look at it along the lines of, even if I had to pay half, what would I have to cut in order to make this, to deliver this money for residents? What would I have to stop providing? Do I, stop building any more affordable homes within the borough? Do we, cut the free school meals provision, which we're putting forward to ensure that, most desperate kids get fed over the half terms? Do we close the libraries? These are big amounts of money. Even £50 million for a local authority to spend on a single asset is an enormous amount of money. So we have to look at it, for my money, through the lens of who has that money, who can make the difference, who can make the change. Finger wagging at Hammersmith and Fulham isn't going to make them find additional money in order to spend on this. Not least when, let's not forget, they are already spending money on the emergency works. 2.5 million, I think, is on their website. So I do get the fact that people think that I'm not doing enough in terms of the grandstanding, but that's all it would be, to be honest. And I don't think that that's an honest approach to take with residents. I would much rather let you know that I'm trying to work collaboratively and constructively with Hammersmith in order to solve a problem, rather than getting what would be cheap publicity, easy publicity, and easy plaudits by taking the hardline route with them, when I know they've not got the money. But the people who have got the money and do need to be, brought to account in my book, are the government. And yes, it could open the floodgates for every other local authority to come to with the begging bowl. But you have to address each case on a case-by-case basis. And this is an important arterial route into the centre of London from southwest London and the southwest in general. And that's when the government really needs to step up and start doing its bit. Don't forget that the government had, I think they announced something like £100 billion of transport infrastructure measures, which they were going to bring forward over the course of the next 5 years. 100 billion, that's with a B. They could have found the money for this very easily, but they have chosen not to. Okay.
Thanks for that. Yeah, well, thanks for a very full answer. I just wanted to say, I don't necessarily mean you have to stand in a sort of pugilistic position in relation to Hammersmith. It's just this issue that as long as this sort of idea that the government could just step in just like that if it wanted to is held, it does let the actual responsible authority off the hook to some extent. No, that's all I'm saying, really. And as I say, it's not because I want you or Richmond council officers or anyone else to be offensive or rude. No. But it's about stating the issue as to who's responsible. Just one final point.
Yes, of course.
When the bridges were devolved to the local authorities, it was with the idea that there should be local control. I mean, that was the point. And I don't know what Hammersmith has done with the money, which would have been part of their annual grant to maintain it. But the idea was for local control, not anything else.
Well, I mean, just to go back on that, we were having this discussion earlier today with one of my officers about the idea that money was given over. There's some money, but nowhere near enough. And also, there's the issue that what's happened is that the money hasn't been well spent over decades. So what we have now is this cumulative impact of lack of maintenance, and it's get back up. What I think really should happen, as we got onto the issue of responsibility for these bridges, is that there should be something, a modern version of the City Bridges Trust that we see that are responsible for things like our bridge, that do a fantastic job. They've got the funding to do it. That's their responsibility. To be honest, I think that it is a bit odd now, particularly when local government has been having its funding cut back, and additional responsibilities loaded onto it time and time again. It's how George Osborne managed to get his economic miracle through of halving the deficit, if you remember, or eliminating the deficit, whichever it was. Is he gave us things to look after, like adult social care and special educational needs funding. All of these things which we have to look after now statutorily, and the minute that we put council tax up, then we get the letters. So we simply don't have the money to deal with it. No local government, no local authority has the money to deal with a 150 quid bridge repair programme, particularly for a national asset like Hammersmith Bridge. But so that's me sort of a lightly stream of consciousness. I'm saying I think that really all of the bridges should be taken out of the responsibility of either any local council, given over to an independent trust, possibly in conjunction with TfL, but they need to be funded properly from central government in order to do that. Frank has a question. Oh, sorry, before I bring in Frank, I've got a note here that on that last question, it said that Jenny Jackson would like to answer this question live. Now, I don't know if Jenny's just pressed the wrong button or if she actually has a burning desire to come in on that.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think I'm unmuted now. Am I, Gareth?
You are, Frank. Just a moment, because on the previous question, I had a little note that said Jenny Jackson wants to answer this question. Jenny,
okay. I've got 4 questions up there, actually, Gareth. I don't know which one you want to answer.
Councillor Roberts, I think she pressed the button by accident.
It pressed the button by accident. Excellent. Frank, the question which you have is, what is the reason why stabilisation works are not going ahead now on the bridge? Why only do one thing at a time? That's your official one. However, if you've got
that's one of my 4. That would be really nice to know.
Is that the one you want to do? Okay, we'll do that. Should we do that one?
Yeah, let's do that one first. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. The reason, I think, the reason why is again, that's that old devil called money. If the £50 million had been brassed up, if Baroness Vera or Grant Shouts had whipped out the checkbook and said, here's £50 million, please get on with stage 1 and stage 2 stabilisation works, as we discussed at the task force, one of these things in October, I think it was, then it would be happening.
Okay.
But they didn't, but it isn't.
Okay, then the second question I have is about the money. When we're talking about money, Hammersmith and Fulham claim they're spending £8 million this year. They've spent £4.5 million last year, or £7 million. They say they were given £16.7 million by TfL a while back. Now, my question is, are they spending their own money, or are they spending TfL's money?
I couldn't answer that one, Frank. I don't have privy access to their budget book. I'm sure it could be found out for you, but I will do my best. We've got your email address. I'll see what I can do for you, but I simply don't know.
Yeah, well, because it seems, that they say they can't afford to put anything into it, any money into the bridge, but then they say they're spending £8 million. TfL apparently given them £16 million a while ago to spend on the bridge. Now, question is around that money's been used for. We just can't.
We'll see what we can do to get an answer for you there, Frank. But as I say, I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. Now, another question. You were on the task force when you decided on a ferry rather than a temporary footbridge. Now, what was the main reason why you went for a ferry? I mean, the footbridge was up, the plans were there, it was ready to go. It would have been built by now. We'd be using it for free 24/7. And now we get a ferry that we have to pay for that's not probably going to be 24/7, that residents, elderly people might struggle to use. What was the reasoning behind having a ferry, and why why is it a good thing for us to have a ferry rather than a temporary footbridge?
Short answer is that the government didn't want one. Long answer is the government didn't want one because they felt that it was going to take longer to deliver the temporary walking and cycling bridge than it would have been to get the ferry up and running. And we all know that.
That's not the case, is it?
I agree with you.
The temporary footbridge that we were proposed by TfL back in April of last year was scheduled to be finished by Christmas of last year. So, what's going on there? They tied the funding of that temporary bridge to the overall budget when that temporary bridge was so much cheaper. Why didn't they just do it?
One of the key things, I think, to be honest, and I think Charlotte Veer mentioned this at the Task Force public meeting, is the idea that if a temporary walking and cycling bridge had been provided, then everybody would have said, hurrah, we can just use that forevermore. It would have been very much like the Chiswick flyover. And they would have said, all right, that's fine.
That's not much of an argument, is it, really?
I know, I need to finish that. I need to finish the point, Frank. They would have said, hurrah, and then Hammersmith Bridge would have sat there and slowly rotted like a long forgotten.
It's a great heritage bridge. That argument just doesn't stack up, does it?
No, I know it doesn't stand up. What I wanted to happen, just so you know, and this is where I can say what I wanted to give verbatim accounts from the task forces, because I said it, and if I said it, then I can break my own confidence. I wanted the money which was going to be spent on the temporary walking and cycling bridge to be put over into creating a brand new permanent walking and cycling bridge. It would have cost a bit more, but one of the reasons why I thought that is that half of the money, which the cost of the temporary walking and cycling bridge would have been, is not just putting it up; it's taking the damn thing down again.
Yeah.
So why spend millions as part of the budget on taking something down?
It wouldn't be that much to take it down, really, would it? Though it was, they told us it was going to cost £7 million.
Yeah.
Now suddenly that bill went up to £27 million. I don't know where the extra 20 came from. It can't cost £7 million to build something and 20 million to take it down, surely.
Yeah. Well, when the pubs reopen, I'll put you in touch with a few of my officers who will give you very breezy comments about TfL procurement. What happens is that developers and bridge providers and what have you see TfL coming along and effectively stick a zero on the end of their cost estimates. But yeah,
Gareth, a slightly more rounded officer view would be that whatever you think about procurement at TfL, and we all have our procurement processes to follow, the probable officer view is that 7 million, the costs were quite severely underestimated, as were the risks. So sorry to steal your political thunder,
that's all
but
right.
I think there were some considerable risks at that level. So at higher levels, bigger issues kick in.
Paul's quite right, and stopping me from throwing the entire Richmond TfL relationship under the bus there.
One last question, Gareth.
One last question, Frank.
Please. What is it that you, Richmond Council, practically can do for us residents in Barnes? What can you do?
Well, I will point you in the direction of the stuff that we have already done. When it's something which is under our direct control, we have done it. So people said that they were concerned about children using the towpath in the hours of darkness, particularly in the evening when they're commuting back. So we said, fine, we will put our park guard operatives on that towpath to shuttle back and forward. There was a bit of hiatus at the very beginning with people were seeing the park guard people going slightly free range, but we've got that now so that they are the amount of emails and Twitter messages. Why are we seeing them outside Sainsbury's? I don't know why they were there. But we put the park guard people on the bridge, on the towpath to make sure it was safe. We've also, again, after getting a bit of ear chewing because I made a comment on the Nick Ferrari radio show about bats, you have to be careful of bats. They're protected species. And again, Lucy Thatcher would be on a ton of bricks if I was putting in lights which were, not bat compliant. But we have now got some lighting going in on the towpath, which is bat compliant. We've done upgrade works onto the towpath to make sure that it doesn't crumble beneath the feet of the very many hundreds of extra people using it. on an hourly basis. And of course, what we've also said we will do is we've committed, we've ring-fenced money so that we've got, so that we can assist with the infrastructure. When we finally know what's going on with the ferry, for the infrastructure to be able to work on our side, we're going to put some money into that. And just in sheer office time, we've had Lucy Thatcher, Senior Planning Officer. We've had Jenny Jackson, Head of Planning. We've had Paul Chadwick, the hardest working man in local government. He's been doing his stuff, attending the task force. Nick O'Donnell and other officers have been going to the technical task force meetings. And we have been throwing as much resources as we possibly can, even to the extent where we quite rightly, other parts of the borough are saying, hang on a minute, why is this money being spent on Barnes? We've spent money, we've done what we can. As I said at the outset, we don't own the bridge. It is not our responsibility to maintain or finance it, but we have done as much as we can. And we will continue to, if somebody comes up with a really good idea, which will make change for people and is, reasonable on the public purse, we will give it due consideration.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. I'll let you move on. Thanks very much for answering.
Excellent. Thank you, Frank. Right. So Barry has a technical question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer this. Barry, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Barry.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times this two-level temporary bridge.
Yeah.
And the diagrams of it show the second level passing through what would be the cross member between the two towers. So there's a cross member runs east-west between the towers at either end of the bridge. That the upper level would go straight through that. How would that work?
I'm not a structural engineer, Barry.
No, you don't have to be a structural engineer. If you look at the bridge, there's a member that runs at the top of the towers straight through from one side to the other. The upper level would go straight through it.
That is a detail which will come out in the feasibility study, I'm sure. I mean, one assumes that because they're still conducting the feasibility study that they've looked at this particular point which you raise, which seems fair enough. I mean, how are you going to get a bus along it if it's going to be banged with a dirty road?
No, the road goes through it. It's not the bus. It's the deck would go straight through it. Yes.
Well, the deck is going to be slightly cantilevered. I think that's right. Slightly cantilevered off, so it starts really some distance away from the bridge and sort of rises above the deck.
It's an arch.
It's an arch.
That's how it works. Yes, because it can't impact on the current surface, or it can't impact on the pylons. So it arches from one side to the other, but it goes straight through the structure of the bridge. It goes straight through.
Yes, to be honest, Barry, I'm
we're going to have to answer that. I'm not sure that is true. That is the case, but clearly it's not our scheme. I mean, I've seen the sketches myself. It doesn't go fundamentally through the bridge's structure, I'm sure. But I'm not a bridge expert, so we can ask the question. But I don't think that's right. I don't think it does have to fundamentally alter the structure of the bridge. It has to touch the bridge at the points of the piers, and that's an issue in its own right from a heritage listed building perspective. But I don't think it has to fundamentally impact on the rest of the structure. But we can, as I say, I'm a layperson on these things. To some extent, we can check that through.
Okay, thank you, Barry. We've got Nigel E. is next.
Good evening. Thank you. The nub of my question is that Mott MacDonald in their report said that the northeast pedestal, which is the one that had the alarm and caused the closure in 2020, now that they've done further investigation of that, it's as capable of bearing load as before the closure in August. And I was told by engineers on the bridge that the sandblasting and inspection of the northwest and southwest pedestals has been completed. So have you or the task force any knowledge yet of the results, please? And if there isn't any further damage discovered, why can the bridge not be opened immediately?
No, the task force doesn't have any knowledge at the moment. I think Paul was on the task force with me, and he'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that the draft agenda which we had coming out, they mentions that we will be getting an update.
Yeah,
on
it
that
does.
report,
Yeah.
Thursday 25th. So as soon as we know, you'll know. And as I mentioned way back at the beginning of the meeting, to be honest, Steve Cowan is not sort of keeping people off the bridge because he likes doing it. If he can get people back across that bridge where he is confident that it is safe for people to do it, he'll be delighted to do it. That's the long and short of it, is making sure that he has the confidence to allow people back across the bridge. And again, if we go back to the ACOM FLEC reports that Mr. Erskine mentioned very early on in the meeting, is that again, at no point has the DFT or Grant Shapps or Baroness Veer said, look at our ACOM report, look at our FLEC report, get that bridge reopened, and we'll take responsibility if it falls down. Nobody said that. So you have to take, Steve Cowan's, he has a safety responsibility to ensure that, he is as convinced as he possibly can be by his engineers. And if the time arises soon when people can get back across it, then, he'll be there.
Yes, but I understand that Hammersmith and Fulham are saying that phase 1 and phase 2 would need to be completed prior to opening the bridge to pedestrians. And, if you think that there's going to be possibly a funding decision in June, well, it's going to take 9 months to build the frames of phase 1 to clamp around the pedestals. So that takes us to, and then I think it's 11 months in total for phase 1. That takes us to July 22, and then 21 months for the phase 2 works, which means that the bridge could possibly open to pedestrians by April 2024.
As soon as we got the update report to the task force, we will be able to offer far more informed comment. And we've got your email address. If I can, I'll drop you a note to let you know what the outcome was.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We're getting up to 528. Let me see. Chizuko, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
So the London mayoral elections are coming up. The present guy hasn't done much for us. So what do you think? Who's the best option for sorting out this bridge?
You're asking a Liberal Democrat politician who the best potential mayoral candidate is. Well, just a moment whilst I do the party political bit. Please vote for Louise Porritt or whoever you wish to vote for. Who's going to be the best person to do it? I don't think that anybody from TfL is going to be in a position to, magically solve this. And if any of them come to you saying that they have got a proposition ahead of the election which is going to solve the issue, then give them a very wide berth. Because to be frank, we have been here before when we have seen Hammersmith Bridge dangled as a little bauble and trinket as a reward for voting in a particular way. And it didn't work then, and I have no reason to believe that it will work this time. What you need to have is people who are going to be honest and open with you about the challenges which are faced, not least about the funding, and listen to them. Somebody who says that they will do X, Y, Z the minute they're elected, not on this watch. We've had the fingers burnt. All of us have had the fingers burnt before. We were told that we were going to get a temporary bridge in 2019, and then 2019 came and went, and it didn't happen. So anybody that says to you, vote for me and I'll get something done about Hammersmith Bridge, probably not. That's about as far as I can go.
Just one other observation about the position of Hammersmith Council vis-a-vis Richmond Council. It's not really a question, it's an observation. I think Richmond people and Barnes people need to get over that bridge more than Hammersmith people tend to need to come over to this side. Obviously, I lived in Hammersmith many, many years ago. I was always in Kensington. I was always in Notting Hill Gate. Why would I come to quiet little Barnes and Sheen? Wouldn't interest me. So I think they don't have the incentive to get that sorted on a pedestrian basis compared to, you know, the motivations that we have on this side of the river. And I think it goes back to the previous guy's question, you know, about the sort of, you know, could be up to 2024, 2025 before we can get across the river, because, you know, Hammersmith are going by the book, and they don't have the urgency or the pressure from their local people that we have on this side. We just need to get across that river, but they don't. Yeah, that's it, really.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, it's a view with I understand where you're coming from on it. Say that. And we move to Edelweiss Arnold.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. So I think you have said quite a lot about the ferry. It was really just an observation that it feels very much that is a distraction, and that quite honestly, the cost of putting the ferry in place is going to mean that they're going to need to keep it in place for a substantial amount of time to recoup the cost of it. And so, to be quite honest, it's not really a solution for commuters. There's no way that we can wait an hour for a ferry that potentially might be full, and then you've got to wait an hour because you've got to get to work on time. And so, to be quite honest, the ferry is just not going to be workable for that. My question was really about whether it's not possible to actually improve access from North Barnes to Putney, because at the moment we have one option, and that is the 533 bus that goes through over Chiswick Bridge. We have got the 485 bus, but that's running every half hour only and sometimes doesn't come. So it's not reliable enough. It really is very difficult for us from kind of Lonsdale roadside to get anywhere, because the buses going to Putney are mostly going through the southern part of Barnes. And so I've written to TfL, I've written to the local MP, and we're just not getting anywhere with this. If the 485 was increased in frequency during rush hour, and if we actually were able to get onto the bus on Lonsdale Road, that would make a massive difference to commuters in this area. It is a hail and ride section, but the 485 does not stop in this section of Lonsdale Road. So it's really a question about what can we do about actually improving our access to commutable routes, because we don't all go to Hammersmith, we travel on from Hammersmith.
Yes, indeed. On the buses, I was part of a cross-party Zoom call with TfL just before Christmas, I think, with your three ward councillors, assuming you live in Barnes, Councillors Hodgins, Brendreth and Palmer. And I know that they're taking the issue with buses very seriously. I don't have an update on that meeting. However, they may be in a good position to let you know about what's going on there. So I would suggest, if you look on the council website to find my councillor, just search councillors in the search bar. And if you drop them an email, they'll be able to give you an update on the conversation that we had with TfL regarding the individual buses. What I can tell you about is I was on this very similar call with all three of them, well, I think it was only yesterday, when we were being given a a heads-up briefing about how the ferry might operate. And this is probably going to be of some comfort, because in the peak, you won't have to wait an hour for a ferry. What they're hoping to do is to have two ferries running during the peak, and they will have a third in standby, just in case one of those ferries blows a gasket or something. And they'll be shuffling backwards and forwards like nobody's business. And they reckon it's going to be, if somebody arrives and, assuming there's no queue and all of this, but they're looking for, a transit time of 5 minutes from boarding the ferry to getting off on the other side.
Right.
Roughly. And that's going to be, off peak, there won't be such a, a demand for the service. So it may be a bit slower, but they will be trying to keep that ferry moving through and backwards and forwards as much as they possibly can in the peak, because they realise they've got a really huge number of people that they need to get shifted, particularly school kids in the morning. So the idea of waiting for an hour, no. And possibly if you're there at 9:30 at night, you might have to wait a bit longer. But it's going to be running 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. is the proposed time. And they, as I say, additional services in the peak as you would expect from any public transport provider.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Not at all, a pleasure. I'm going to do one last question because we've been here for 90 minutes and I could keep going all night, but I do have to give some concern for my officers who probably don't want to be here all night. So what we will try to do as much as possible is to, we're going to keep a note of all of the questions, and if we can get an email answer to you, then we certainly will. Okay, so let me see who the next one is. Okay, so Carol, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Carol.
Hello. Yeah, it was just to help with the funding after the bridge is completely repaired. Would they consider creating a toll so that, you know, at least they could then recoup some of the expense from people going back and forth for cars and vans?
Okay.
It's just a thought. Because they've had,
sure,
you know, other bridges around the UK have actually recouped, and they've carried on recouping money. I come from Devon, so the Tamar Bridge is the one that I think of. And even now, after many years it's been built, it takes a lot of income and has continued to do so.
Absolutely. I think that a toll that will be under consideration. There's no doubt about that. That, you know, they will be looking at every single business case that they can to see whether it is possible to fund this bridge in an alternative way rather than simply going to the Treasury with a begging bowl. It may be that the government will front load the financing on the basis of then getting some recoupment back from a toll of some sort. Not to say that the toll will happen, and not to even say that the toll is being approved or being smiled on, but it must surely be one of the options which is going to be considered at some point. I think that, to be honest, public mood has changed over the last, well, let's say 6 months, I think, on this one, because if you'd said to people about, 12 months ago, there's a possibility of a toll, then it would have been pitchforks and placards, every evening outside the bridge, and people simply wouldn't have wanted it. But I think that now people are just so desperate to get back over that bridge, to be able to get a bus back over that bridge, to get a car over there, that the idea of a toll is now edging. I think is possibly the easiest way, because they're edging into the mainstream. Not to say that it's a hugely popular idea, but it's less of a toxic idea than we had in the past. There. Are you still there?
Yeah, thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, not at all. Okay, so it is now 8:05. I hope that this has in some way been useful. I've tried to answer, I hope you'll see it as honestly, some people might say brazenly, as I possibly can to give you the information. If a question has been put up there, I've not ducked any of them. And we've got so many more questions. I can see that there are 80 questions waiting to be answered. And as I said, we could be here all night. So what we will try and do for those people is we'll either send a direct response to you, or we'll try and group the questions on themes, and we will just do a blanket email to everybody to say, look, there was a question about X, there was a question about Y, and there was a question about Z. Here's the answers to X, Y, Z. We are doing as much as we can on your behalf to drive this thing forward. As soon as we get any information, we will let you know about it, because my view is that the more information that can be put into the public domain, the better, as long as it gets security clearance. Then as long as we can make sure that we are communicating frequently with you, then we will hopefully get some understanding. I know, as I said at the very beginning, that tempers are running incredibly high, and that there are huge issues regarding the return to school. I saw the pictures on social media of the kids cycling through knee-deep water. We all want to make sure that this is getting driven along as fast as we possibly can. There is certainly no reluctance on the part of Richmond Council to stand, to get things going. We are not standing in anybody's way. We are considering every planning application that comes before us. We are doing what we can within the task force to ensure that there's a degree of urgency And as I say, if you've got questions that you want to put to the task force, then please, I'm going out on the limb here and hoping they'll understand. Put them through Hammersmith Bridge SOS, and they know how to get hold of me, and I will do my best to get those questions answered for you. So thank you very much for the time this evening of Nick O'Donnell, of Lucy Thatcher, Paul Chadwick, Jenny Jackson, who have been here to offer officer support, and of course to Effie, Fenner, and Ellie, who've been dealing with the making this whole thing work. This is the first time we've done this sort of webinar thing with the question and answer, so I think it's gone rather well. And but always, chiefly, is thank you to yourselves for your time, your consideration, and your patience, and your really very interesting and excellent questions this evening. So I wish you a very pleasant rest of the evening, and no doubt, if you found this useful, do let us know, and we'll see if we can schedule another one in due course. But unfortunately, we're about to get purdah, so we won't be able to do anything until after May the 6th. So thank you for your time, and speak to you soon. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.